In this particular section of our course, we're going to talk all about branching and merging in TFVC, or Team Foundation Version Control. So let's jump in and explain what you're going to learn. So the first thing you're going to learn is we're going to talk about branching strategies. So before we can get into actually branching and merging, we have to have some type of strategy in place. And there's various strategies that you can put together to work in your organization. Some are very straightforward and small and very minimal, and then there's some very complex types of branching strategies, all depending on what type of software you build and what your needs are. Then we're going to move into how to branch. So once we have the strategy in place, now let's understand how we're going to branch our code to make that strategy come to life. After that, we're going to show you how to track changes that are being made to the application as you're working with it, and then merging those changes back into a branch. So we're going to show you how you actually can do all those things. So we'll branch, we'll track our changes, we'll take our changes that we've branched and that we created, and we'll merge them into another branch. And so between the branching and the merging, you should be able to come up with a good, solid strategy for how you're going to set up your development environment. So with that, let's move on and start talking about defining a branching strategy. In this particular section, which is the last section of the course, we're talking about branching and merging in TFVC. So before we can dive into actually branching and merging, we have to define a branching strategy. And so that's what we're going to talk about in this particular video. So what are you going to learn? Well, we're going to learn about branching models, and that's really it. This is going to be more of a talk than it is. There is no demo. It's more of a talk about the different models available and let you decide based on the content and the education you get what model would be best for your organization. So we can start off with what we call the no branches model. This is where everybody works from the same main source line. Again, there's just labeling and there is no other branches being directed off of this one. So it's strictly running in the main and everything is checked in and checked out to that particular main. And it's a good process for small teams. If you have more than 3 people on a team, I don't think this model is going to work too well. It's just there's too much going on in a source control system that 3 or 4 people starting to dump code into the same main line are going to start causing some issues. And so you can run into conflicts. You're going to have to figure out how you're going to resolve these conflicts. The other thing you have here is you're labeling for every single release. You're not branching for a release. You're not branching for features. So again, everything is dumped right into the main line. And again, it works for small teams, but beyond that, I don't think it's going to work for most teams. The other thing that you can have with a mainline branch or no branch strategy is there's no need for isolation. Obviously, we're not isolating anything because we're not creating any branches. So that's one of the upsides. If people want to go with the no isolation model, then they can actually use this model. But again, I've not seen this particular model be successful in teams no larger than 4 people work very well. At that point, I think we need to start looking at a little more mature, a more sophisticated type of branching strategy. Again, this is a place to start though. So if you're not doing anything today, I would suggest that you start here and build up. Don't start with the biggest, fanciest model and try and work yourself into it. Work with what you have here to start with, just what you need, and then grow. And you'll find that half the time you can get by with a fairly small and fairly simple branching strategy. So the next one we have is the branch for release model, where we're actually branching to support the ongoing releases that are going on in the system. And this is one of the most common cases where you need to create a branch. It's for the branching for the release model. As you can tell from the image here, we're working in main, we release, we maybe run into some issue or we have to create a hotfix, we reverse engineer that back into main, and then continue on. So again, if there is a release, and you can notice here in about the center of the screen, the hotfix, if there is any issues that have to be arose and you have to make changes to the code once it's been released, you want to make sure you reverse engineer those back up into main so that it can be picked up and used in the rest of the development processes going forward. The last thing you want to do is make a fix in the release branch of release V1, that is, and then have to go and not put that change into the main and then release again, having the same issue released in release 2. So again, make sure that if you're doing a release branch and you have to create a hotfix or some kind of a change, that you merge it back up into the main. The next branching is for servicing. So servicing branches for like things like hotfixes or service packs really allows us to do this concurrent management of the service packs. So we can have multiple service packs or structuring here. You can see that this will give us an accurate snapshot of the code base at service and release time. So you can see from the main here, we are going along and we branch for a service pack. This is release 1, service pack 1. And then we actually do a release at the end, reverse engineering back up into the service pack, and then back up into the main. And this is created when the release is ready to be locked down. So again, we want to make sure that we're reverse engineering correctly and we're locking our branches down. Now, in previous topics in this particular course, we talked about locking and what type of locks that you can put onto artifacts in version control. Branching is just another one of those things that we can actually lock down. So we can lock down our release code and so that no one can go in and make changes to it. And we're getting ready to lock that down. We can actually go about creating our service branches. Feature branch, and this is another common feature of branching strategies, is again the branch by feature model. You create a development branch that you're going to work from, and you basically merge back into the main and merge from the main. So you can see here for feature, we have created a branch for feature. We work on our feature and then we reverse engineer those changes back into main. We may be going along and we can branch again as needed. And so normally the image doesn't really show it as well as I'd like it to, but normally what you would do is you would branch per feature off of main. So you would perform all the work in the feature branch. And then you'd merge that back into main, which will be the reverse engineering that you see there, the reverse engineer, the RI. And again, once it's complete, you'd want to eliminate that particular branch that you created. Feature branches are pretty much short-lived branches. They're there to create the feature, and then you delete them when they are finished. There's no need to keep them and have multiple feature branches because you may have 10, 20, 30 different features that you're going to want to branch for. Over time, that's going to add up. You don't want 30 branches that are no longer being used. So you want to make sure you clean up after yourself when you're using the feature branch model. I personally like the feature branch model. And again, when you're using TFVC, it works real well. And it's just a model that I like to work with because it scales really well. Just like the branch to release, the branch for feature works really well for large teams and small teams. Okay, anyone can adopt this. Even if you're a one-man shop or one-woman shop, you can definitely branch and follow this feature branching model. It's again, one of those things where we start slow and we work our way into it and decide that maybe this is the one that's for us. And then again, like I was saying earlier, you merge all your changes back into that main line and continue on, at some point releasing from the main. Branch by hotfix, not recommended. Okay, I'm just going to put it out there. You will read about branching for hotfixes. I'm sure if you do your homework, you're going to hear about it. I personally do not recommend branching for a hotfix. And if you read anything on the internet, I'm sure there will be schools of thought on both sides of the fence. I think the model, if you look at this model, is very complex. And I don't necessarily think that adding another level of branching onto your model is going to make it any better. We've talked about things like a release branch. We talked about service branches. We talked about feature branches. And you can adopt a little bit of each if you want to. You could have your feature branches off of main, and you can also have releases off of main. So you could be combining those two types of models into one. So you do your feature branches, you do your work, you merge to main, you delete the feature branch, now you branch for a release, and you manage your release in that release branch. Meanwhile, you're still developing in main. Okay, so, and if there's an issue in the release, you can make a change and you can actually then reverse engineer it back up into main, and eventually it'll go out into a new feature branch. So there are ways to combine a couple of these to get to where you want to go. I don't necessarily think hotfixing is a branching strategy that I'd want to adopt, because now you're taking everything. Imagine that we've mixed the release branch and the feature branching into one specific model. Now we're going to take that and we're going to turn it into the hotfix branch next. So again, it's just more complex. It's a lot more maintenance, and I really don't recommend it for anybody, but I do think it's important we talk about it. So I have. So with that, I'd like to just wrap up. We talked all about branching models in this particular video, and I really appreciate it, and I hope that you've gotten something out of this that's going to help you at least start the ball rolling and having those conversations about the branching strategy that you want to define for your organization. Remember, takeaways here are: start small and simple, do only what you need to do to get by, grow into the other branching strategies that you're going to have. So start maybe with the mainline, no branch strategy, and grow into other branching strategies. It's okay to combine a few strategies as long as you don't let it get too out of hand and, grow a maintenance nightmare for yourself. And lastly, the hotfix branch that we talked about, that branching model that you'll read and hear about, is not one I would recommend. I think it's just too complex. So with that, once you've decided on your branching model, that we can now move forward with actually learning how to branch.